Welcome to Types of Killers. Today we'll be looking at organized and disorganized serial killers. The FBI has roughly categorized serial killers into two different types, organized and disorganized. I don't know about you, but whenever I think of killers, I think of Freddy versus Jason. I wouldn't know which category to put each one in, but maybe by the end of this article, you'll have an idea. Organized types of serial killers. Organized types are usually of high intelligence and plan their crimes quite methodically, usually abducting victims, killing them in one place, and disposing of them in another. They will often lure the victims with ploys appealing to their sense of sympathy. For example, Ted Bundy, who would put his arm in a fake plaster cast and ask women to help him carry books to his car, where he would beat them unconscious with the cast and spirit them away. Others specifically target prostitutes, who are likely to voluntarily go with a serial killer posing as a customer. They maintain a high degree of control over the crime scene and usually have a good knowledge of forensic science that enables them to cover their tracks, such as by burying the body or weighing it down and sinking it in a river. They follow their crimes in the media carefully and often take pride in their actions as if it were a grand project. The organized killer is usually socially adequate and has friends and lovers, often even a spouse and children. They are the type who, when captured, are most likely to be described by acquaintances as a really nice guy or someone who wouldn't hurt a fly. Some serial killers go to lengths to make their crimes difficult to discover, such as falsifying suicide notes, setting up others to take the blame for their crimes, and faking gang warfare. When I think of these types of killers, I think of Dexter. Disorganized types of serial killers. Disorganized types are often of low intelligence and commit their crimes impulsively. Whereas the organized killer will specifically set out to hunt a victim, the disorganized will murder someone whenever the opportunity arises, rarely bothering to dispose of the body but instead just leaving it at the same place in which they found the victim. They usually carry out blitz attacks, leaping out and attacking their victim with warning, and will typically perform whatever rituals they feel compelled to carry out necrophilia, mutilation, etc., once the victim is dead. They rarely bother to cover their tracks, but may still evade capture for some time because of the level of cunning that compels them to keep on the move. They are often socially inadequate with few friends, and they may have a history of mental problems and be regarded by acquaintances as eccentric or even a bit creepy. They have little insight into their crimes and may even block out the memories of their killings. An significant number of serial killers show certain aspects of both organized and disorganized types, although usually the characteristics of one type will dominate. Some killers descend from being organized into disorganized behavior as their killings continue. They will carry out carefully and methodical murders at the start, but as their compulsion grows out of control and utterly dominates their lives, they will become careless and impulsive. When I think of these types of killers, I think of that guy from You and his wife Love. Motive types. The organized and disorganized model relates to the killer's methods. With regards to motives, they can be placed into five different categories: visionary, mission oriented, hedonistic, gain motivation or gain motivated, and power or control. Visionary. Contrary to popular opinion, serial killers are rarely insane or motivated by hallucinations and or voices in their heads. Many claim to be, usually as a way of trying to get acquitted by reason of insanity. There are, however, a few genuine cases of serial killers who were compelled by such delusions. Herbert Mullen slaughtered 13 people after voices told him that murder was necessary to prevent California from suffering an earthquake. Mullen went to great pains to point out that California did indeed avoid an earthquake during his murder spree. Ed Gein honestly believed that by eating the corpses of women who looked like his mother, he could preserve his mother's soul inside his body. He killed two women who bore passing resemblances to his mother, eating one and being apprehended while in the process of preparing the second woman's body for consumption. He also used the flesh of an exhumed corpses to fashion a woman suit for himself so that he could become his mother and carried on conversations with himself in a falsetto voice. After his arrest, he was placed in a mental facility for the remainder of his life. Mission oriented. These serial killers believe that their acts are justified on the basis that they are getting rid of a certain type of people, often prostitutes or members of a certain ethnic group. They believe that they are doing society a big favor. Robert Picton of Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, is accused of being this type of killer. He is currently charged with the murder of 27 prostitutes from Vancouver's downtown east side and is suspected in the deaths of up to 30 more. Hedonistic, or sometimes called the thrill killer. This type kills for the sheer pleasure of it, although what aspect they enjoy varies. Some may enjoy the actual chase of hunting down a victim more than anything, whilst others may be primarily motivated by the act of torturing and abusing their victims whilst they are alive. Yet others may kill the victim quickly, almost as if it were a chore, and then indulge in the necrophilia or cannibalism with their body. Usually, there is a strong sexual aspect to the crimes, even if it may not be immediately obvious, but some killers obtain a surge of excitement that is not necessarily sexual, such as David Berkowitz, who got a thrill out of shooting young couples in cars at random and then running away without ever physically touching the victims. The gain motivated. Most criminals who commit multiple murders for material ends, such as a mob hitman, are not classified as serial killers because they are motivated by greed rather than psychopathological compulsions. There is a fine line separating such killers, however. For example, Marcel Petrat, who operated in Nazi occupied France, would classify as a serial killer. He posed as a member of the French resistance and lured wealthy Jewish people to his home, claiming he would smuggle them out of the country. Instead, he murdered them and stole their belongings, killing 63 people before he was finally caught. Although Petrat's primary motivation was materialistic, few would deny that a man willing to slaughter so many people simply to acquire a few dozen suitcases of clothes and jewelry was a compulsive killer and psychopath. Power control. This is the most common type of serial killer. Their main objective for killing is to gain and exert power over their victim. Such killers are usually abused as children, which means they feel incredibly powerless and inadequate, and often they indulge in rituals that are linked, often very specifically, to forms of abuse they suffered themselves. This is your content warning. Things are going to border on sexual assault descriptions. One killer, for example, forced young girls to perform oral sex on him, after which he would spank the girl before finally strangling her. After capture, the killer claimed that when he was a child, his older sister would force him to perform oral sex on her, then spank him in order to terrify him into not telling his parents. The ritual he performed with his victims would negate the humiliation he felt from his abuse as a child, although such relief would only be temporary. And like other such killers, he would soon feel compelled to repeat his actions until eventual capture. The vast majority of child abuse victims do not become serial killers, of course, meaning that such abuse is not regarded as the sole trigger of such crimes in these cases. Many power and control motivated killers sexually abuse their victims, but they differ from hedonistic killers in that rape is not motivated by lust, but as simply another form of dominating the victim. As Ed Kemper once said, ripping their heads off, their bodies sitting there, that get me off. In summary, some serial killers may seem to have characteristics of more than one type. For example, British killer Pete Sutcliffe appeared to be both a visionary and a mission-oriented killer, in that he claimed voices told him to clean up the streets of prostitutes. Alternatively, another school of thought classifies motives as being either need, greed, or power. Fundamentally, all crimes fall into one of these three categories. So that was the article. Um, no matter what kind of killer you're talking about, going back to our first question of how would you classify Freddy versus Jason, I think they're both kind of punk because, they're still killers. So remember, forensic scientists, I will see you on the flip side.